Welcome to Maple Springs Baptist Church and our online service for this Sunday that we've had to do because of inclement weather. And so I don't know if it's snowing there or snowed while you're watching this, or maybe you don't have power and so you're not watching this. But nonetheless, I hope you're safe. And we decided that we would cancel services for this Sunday just today due to the inclement weather. But nonetheless, we went ahead and we're posting this sermon because we're in the series, The Effective Life. And this is week 2. Last week, Tracy started us off in this foundation, but the crux for this whole thing is just sort of crazy because I think everyone here, everyone listening, can lean into what the frustration that I feel is a frustration that's pretty common amongst most people. Now, maybe you're that person that says, no, I don't ever get frustrated. There's a lot of people that aren't very honest with themselves, so let me help you today to be honest with yourself. But the truth of the matter is, this time of year, and I know we're a little bit off, and when I say a little bit off, this last Friday, my wife and I are actually celebrating Christmas because we had some COVID issues in our house, and then we weren't able to get together with our family, and so it was really our grandkids and one of our sons and his wife and my daughter actually came up from Florida, and we got to spend some time together and have our Christmas session. And it's about 3 weeks late, and it's sort of crazy. But this time of year always leads us into some kind of frustration. And when I say this time of year, I'm talking the new year, January. And when I was sitting back, reading my Bible, planning what God wanted us to go through as we begin this new year, I realized that there's this common frustration that everybody sort of goes through. It's that frustration that starts in November and December, and you start thinking about it. Maybe you were at your grandmother's house, or you're at a friend's house, or maybe it was your house, and you kept eating all these great foods, and every time you had one of those decadent desserts or some chocolate or whatever you had, maybe it was some presents, maybe it went as far back as your Thanksgiving meal. Every time you took a bite of turkey or ham or whatever it was, and you said, you know what? I really need to get better about my eating habits. I really need to do better this year. And once the holidays are over, I'm gonna do what everybody else says we're gonna do. We're gonna lose some weight. And you didn't like to use the word resolution, but you made yourself some promises that in 2022, I'm gonna live healthier. I'm gonna stop eating all this bad stuff. Maybe you even went so far as to start cleaning out your cupboards and throwing stuff away, and I'm not gonna buy this stuff. Or maybe you went to the extreme of, I'm not going to buy the bad stuff. I'm going to start buying that quinoa stuff and kale and all that stuff that you know nobody likes, but you have to eat because it's good for you. And maybe you said, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. Or maybe it wasn't that. Maybe you were out shopping. You were out buying Christmas presents, and it hit you as you're up paying for Christmas presents. You're like, you know what? I'm so tired of living paycheck to paycheck. And in 2022, I'm not going to do that live paycheck to paycheck thing. I am going to start saving my money. I'm going to start living better. I'm going to be wise about what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest my money wisely. I'm going to set some goals, and I'm going to keep those goals this year in 2022. Or even yet, maybe you came through church and you were like, man, I wish I could have given more to Lottie Moon International Missions, Christmas Missions Offering. Or maybe it was some other project. Maybe you just wanted to be able to give to Toys for Tots or one of the other programs going on during the holidays. And you said, man, I just didn't have the resources, and I want to be more generous like Jesus, and I'm going to make 2022 better. And maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it was different in some other aspect, but you came along some kind of plan, and you stayed away from that word resolution, but you were frustrated because here we are a couple weeks into the new year, and the new you hasn't really happened. You made yourself promises, but you didn't live up to them. And things have derailed you, and even deeper than those superficial ones, even deeper than every time you see one of those Planet Fitness commercials or Weight Watchers commercial or whatever it was, maybe a Charles Schwab commercial for investing or some kind of investment opportunities or some kind of banking commercial, maybe instead of feeling guilty or bad about those things because you haven't been doing them already, maybe it was something deeper. Maybe it was a lot like this guy Peter that we're talking about. Because maybe in 2021, at the end of 2021, you did what most of us do, and you said, you know what? I'm tired of this Christian life that I don't feel like is really giving me enough. I thought when I became a Christ follower, it would be more. And maybe you're sitting back in your mind and you made some promises that in 2022 things were going to be better in your Christian life. That you were going to be at church more often. That you were going to be in Sunday school and Bible studies more often. Maybe you were going to read your Bible and pray every day. Maybe you're going to do all those things, and you had determined, and you didn't, once again, you didn't use the word resolution. You didn't even use the word goal because you hate those things, because they remind you how many times you promised yourself and fail. And here it is, a couple weeks in, and things have derailed us once again. We've had shutdowns for COVID, and now it's weather, and you're sitting back going, man, I just didn't feel like getting up and reading my Bible, and worked through some extra curveballs my way, and I stayed up late watching the national championship game, and I didn't get up early and read my Bible and all those things, and you feel guilty, but you don't want anybody else to know, and so you're like, no, I'm not making any promises this year. But you sit back and you feel a little disillusioned, disconnected, because your church life, your Christian life, the life God called you to just doesn't seem to be much. It's ineffective. It seems to be worthless. Peter had those struggles in his life too. And as we started the series last week, and Tracy pointed out the initial thoughts, Peter is this guy who walks with Jesus just like we are for 3.5 years. He was physically a disciple, a follower of Jesus when Jesus is here on earth. One of the closest guys to Jesus. And what Peter does is he follows Jesus, sees the miracles, sees all the things, gets excited about them, and makes promises. Almost you could call them resolutions. He says things like, Jesus, even if you go to prison, I'll be right there with you. In fact, Jesus, even if you die, I'm going to die with you. And Jesus looked at him that day and said, no, you're not. Peter, no, you're not. In fact, here's the sad news of your life, Peter. You're like most of the people I know. You're one of those Christ followers who's putting all your effort into yourself. And Peter, you will fail, because before the night's over, you're going to deny me, not once, not twice, but 3 times you're going to deny me before the rooster crows. We know the story pretty much. It happens exactly. Peter finds himself in situations where he was resting in his own efforts and his own strength. You say, how can you say that? Because as they came to take Jesus, the first thing Peter does is pulls out his sword and tries to cut an ear off of tries to cut a head off of a serpent. Peter says, I've got this. I'll fight the battles for God on my own strength. And Jesus said, no. That's not what I'm here for. And before you know it, Peter's looking at others who are accusing him of being a Christ follower and saying, I don't even know the man. Peter walks off disappointed because his life was not what he thought it would be. And maybe you're like that. Maybe you come to church all the time and you thought, hey, you know what? If I listen to more sermons, these sermons will do more for me. Hey, this year I'm going to read my Bible more. Hey, I'm going to be strong in my strength. And you know what? It's not. Because last week what Tracy helped us understand was that foundation. What Peter says as we start off, in fact, if you have your Bibles and you're following along, or you can follow along by looking what's on screen or listen to me, and we're in 2 Peter chapter 1. In 2 Peter chapter 1, he gives us this thinking as he's writing his letter. And by the way, this is the last thoughts before he's going to die. Peter died a martyr's death, but Peter, he's grown up now, and he's more mature in what he understands about Jesus in his life. And Peter's the same guy that denies Jesus 3 times. He's now useful, and he's trying to help these Christ followers who are going to be battling scoffers, who are going to be battling false prophets and false teachers in the last days of his life. And he gives some warnings to Christ followers about the life that God's called us to. And he says this in verse number 3, his divine power. Notice it's that first word, his. God's divine power. Christ Jesus' divine power. The foundation that Tracy gave us last week, if you hadn't heard this sermon, was the power of God. So I want to be very clear as we start out today. You know, it is not salvation based upon your works. Today we're going to talk about your goal or your part in this whole Christian life. But the foundation of the Christian life, as Peter would tell you, as I'm going to tell you, as the Bible tells us over and over again, Paul and even Jesus, is not in anything that you do. The foundation of your Christian life is in his divine power, and that's what he starts off. God's divine power has given us everything everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Verse 4, through these he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them, this is the purpose, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. And that's what Tracy led us through last week when he talked about the power of God that saves us. And then he talks about the fact that we have not just the power of God, but these divine promises. That God's given us promises like, I'll never leave you or forsake you. That when life's so bad and you're full of sin and you're sinking into the clay of sin, that God's right arm will lift us up and put us on the rock. That when we confess our sins, that God is faithful and just to forgive us of those sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's what he tells us. And he goes on even deeper than that. He tells us that in Christ, we have a purpose too. And we're called to do something. We're not called to sit in a pew. Peter, you're not Peter pew sitter. You're Peter, I've got a plan for you. In fact, Paul put it better in Ephesians 2:8-9, where he says, you're saved by grace through faith in Christ Jesus, and it's not of yourself, but it's a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. But then in verse 10, he goes on and tells us, he said, you know what? You're God's divine masterpiece, his workmanship. And he's got works for you to do that he's ordained way before time even began. He had a purpose for you. And then he shifts gears in verse number 5, and that's where we pick up today. And he says, for this very reason, make every effort. Notice that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective. Peter says, I've been there. I was ineffective. I was just raw and didn't do anything. I took what God gave me, that faith that he gave me. I took the power, the purposes, and the promises and didn't do anything with it, and I lived an ineffective life. And that's where I found myself denying Jesus Christ. So if you want to be better than that, if you want to have the effective life, he says, you're going to add these things to your faith. He says they'll keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But, the big but whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their past sins. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, so you understand he's writing to Christ followers. He says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, make every effort. Same words again. Notice it, same words that were in verse 5 or in verse 10. Make every effort. Make every effort. Make every effort to confirm your calling and election. For if you do these things, you will never stumble, and you will receive a rich welcome into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. See, in verses 3 and 4, Peter's saying that we have this divine provision, that God has given us all these things we need, and he's enabled us, which enabled us to live a life that is a life that's called to a holy and divine calling. God gives us everything that we desire and the power to do God's will is what he's saying. But then he shifts his focus in verses 5 and 7. Peter says, and once again, he's not telling us about salvation. He's telling us what to do because we've been saved. In light of our salvation, to have more of a life than we've ever had before. Peter says, hey, you know what? Here's what I've learned. You can't just take that salvation and sit on it. He says, get off your holy behinds and let's get moving forward and let's add to it. And he uses some intense language. In fact, today I'd call this message, what we're supposed to have today is intense effort. Intense effort. As a teacher for years in high school courses and even around church, but in high school and junior high classes in school, and then a coach, I coached for many years. One of the statements, and if I had some of my ball players were here today, this is what they'd tell you that I used to say all the time. One of my favorite statements I would start off, because I found students in school It wasn't, sometimes they thought, well, I don't know. I wasn't born gifted. And I was told this, the same thing with the athletes I worked with. Effort is everything. Effort's everything. And I think Peter would write that down and sign his name to it today as what he's trying to tell us in verses 5 through 7. Effort's everything. Effort's everything. See, I always told my ball players there's always someone more talented. There's someone faster, stronger, can do more. But you can overcome those things by giving intense effort, because effort's everything. Because here's what I do know. Some of the greatest athletes, they're gifted with natural gifts, and they don't use them to their fullest ability. And I think that's probably true of a lot of Christ followers too. We don't use our gifts the way it is. And what Peter's saying here is this divine nature will always cause a sinner to change, and that's verses 3 and 4. The change is going to happen. But it works best when we give an intense effort to help move us closer to Jesus. The journey with Jesus is something we've got to put some effort into. Our walk with God is not something you're just going to sit back and go on autopilot. Let's get moving is what Peter would tell us. And Jesus offers divine resources through his great and precious promises is what we saw in verses 3 and 4. But you have to grab the promises. You have to take it and use it. You have to move forward. You have to run with them. So if you're going to experience this true transformation of character and have this effective life rather than the life where we keep setting the same goals, same resolutions, and having the same outcome every year, Peter's saying, hey, you know what? Put some intense effort to it. This personal capacity to wholly follow Christ is great, and use every intense effort to do it. So if we're going to talk about intense effort, we better understand this intense effort. When the New Testament writers write about intense effort, make every effort is what the version that we're reading. Some of the other versions translate it into being diligent. When they say with all diligence throughout the New Testament, they paint this picture a lot of times of sporting events. And you can paint the picture of these people running in a race, and as the group gets close to the finish line, that intense effort is shown by the runner who at the last second puts a little bit more effort into the race and lunges his chest forward to break the tape and take the prize. Think about Paul and his words to Timothy as he talked about, hey, I've finished the race. I've pressed forward to the prize of the high calling of Jesus Christ. And what he's saying there once again is, I didn't just come in and sit down in church and do nothing. I pressed forward. See, Paul understood what life was all about. Peter understood it because he said it's going to be intense effort. That effort just like an athlete. It's the effort that you're going to have to push forward. And Peter here, he's exhorting us to run full throttle forward in our pursuit of the godly life. Full throttle forward to work harder to be more like Jesus Christ. And it's not that work that's going to save you. It's that work that's going to work with the Holy Spirit to transform you. Because just as God has done his part, there is a part that we have to fulfill too. See, until now, in Peter's writing, Peter's been telling us about the resources of God. He's been telling us about God's sufficiency, his great and precious promises, his desire for us to live above the ways of the world. That's what Peter's been talking about. But now Peter says in verse number 5, hey, let's stop and think about this because there's something you need to do. There's a shift in the pattern that Peter's talking about. And he says, hey, you know what? This kind of change of life, of being effective, doesn't happen to people who are just lazy and don't do anything with their Christian life. He says he's calling you, and in 2022, we can sit back and we can say, I wish the church would grow. I wish God's word would get spread around the world. I wish. But wishes don't get it done, Peter would tell you. Put some intense effort into this thing. Intense effort suggests the seriousness and importance of our responsibility. And this is the thought that we would carry through today. This is the thought I would want you to have. We cannot expect to grow and thrive in this divine life without intense effort. We cannot expect to grow, and not just grow, but thrive. Grow and thrive in the divine life, because isn't that what we'd like to be? We like to do that. So in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5, he starts off, and this is the language he uses. He says, for this very reason. For this very reason. Now, it's interesting that Peter starts off in this new section. Now, he's just gotten done last week. If you didn't hear Tracy's message on the power, the promises, and the purpose of God, that you need to go back and do. He's moving forward now. He says that's what God's given us, and that's great. And that's why it comes first, and we are no way diminishing it. But what do we do with it now? And we've got and that's where he starts, and he says, for this very reason. In fact, those words, if you read them, you'll understand, for this very reason demands context, and that's what we had to understand. See, in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4 tells us that we already have this endless reservoir of God's grace to make us more. Everything we need to be successful in life, to be effective in life, everything we need for godly character and fruit is there. It's been provided by God. Everything you need this year in 2022 to overcome the temptations you're going to face. Everything you need to achieve the maturity you're going to have. Everything you need to develop purpose and productivity for God in your life. Everything you need. In fact, we could even say this. Everything you need in 2022 to be a better husband, better father, better wife, better mother, a better son, better daughter, better student, better employee, a better citizen, God has given us everything we need to be a better, and you fill in the blank there. Better at what? God has given us everything we need to be better at being a Christ follower, to be better at the image of Jesus Christ. And these resources come to us in the form of God's power of faith through salvation and in his great and precious promises. See, when you understand what God and Jesus Christ has done for you, what he can do for you, and what he offers to do for you, when you understand the riches that are available to you and the plans and expectations that he has for you, that's what verses 3 and 4 were all about, then you have found the greatest single motivation for intense effort. That's what he's talking about. See, Peter is reminding us once again of our sacred obligation to maximize the resources of God. You're not expected to do things with what you don't have, but God is expecting you, and that's what Jesus told in parable after parable after parable. The expectations Jesus has in your life is to do what you have with what he's given you. And that's what Peter says, add some intense effort to it. See, God has given us everything we need, the resources. God has given us, he's also saying, hey, there's no reason, there's no excuse for being lazy. There's no excuse for being passive. There's no, hey, I'm too old to do this, because when you start doing it, you go through the Bible, you'll find there are guys who just started out serving God at 80 years old. 80 years old. That's the truth. God calls the young, not the old. There's no excuse. Well, I've got this, I've got that. No, God says, don't give me excuses. Use what you've got. In fact, the final judgment for us as Christ followers is the fact that we're going to be judged based upon what we had and what we did with what we had. Remember the parable of the talents? Jesus said the master gave out certain varying amounts to different people. And the guy who had 5 doubled his, and the master was happy. And the guy who had 2 doubled his, and the master was happy. But the guy who had 1, he was afraid and just took his and buried it. He didn't lose it, he just buried it. And when the master came back, he gave him back what he had. And what happened to that guy? The master got very upset, took it away from him and said he was an evil servant. And he bound him up and he threw him out into darkness. There was punishment for him. And that should help us understand the expectations of God. That's the truth there. See, we're to take what God has produced in us and work it to a greater cause. That's the whole idea. We're to work it out every day in our lives. We're to take the promises that God has given to us, those great and precious promises, and diligently apply them. And then Peter uses this word, add. We haven't really talked about it, but add is not a mathematical term in this situation. In the Greek, the term add actually is epikorageo. And that may not mean a whole lot to you because you don't speak Greek, but let me help you with that. It has that root word chorus in it, right? Chorus. And it really, the originality of it was whenever there was a big play or a big production in town, They would find a rich person, and the community, the government, the local government would make him responsible, the person who had wealth, responsible for taking care of all of the expenses of those people that were involved in that chorus, that choir. They'd pay for food and lodging and care and anything they needed. And so the word he's chosen here is an important word, because it's not really, we're not talking about choir, but it gives us the idea here as we talk about adding. It's not just, hey, put this in your pocket and carry it with you alongside of. It's the word means to supply in a copious measure, to provide beyond the need, to supply more than generously. It's a lavish thing. It's supposed to be so overwhelming. That's where we get the idea of intense effort, not just any effort, intense effort. We're not just adding a little bit. It's a lavishly covering all expenses. We're going to do everything we can. Not the bare minimum, as the Jewish Pharisees would tell you, but we're to go out of our way to do more. That's the intense effort here. See, it's not enough to have an understanding of what intense effort is, though. We have to translate that intense effort not just from the mode, but into the pattern. So if 2 Peter chapter 1 tells us about the understanding of what intense effort is, we would go over to the book of Colossians in chapter 3 and find what Paul has to say about the pattern. And that's what we're going to leave you with. 4 things we can talk about as Paul gives us the pattern for intense effort. It's pretty easy. These verses are pretty familiar to you. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 and 24, the Apostle Paul writes this. He says, whatever you do, great statement there. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. 4 things that give us the pattern. First of all, number 1, and we'll go through these pretty quick. Number 1, intense effort, according to what Paul says, intense effort is a lifestyle. He says, whatever you do, whatever you do. Now, you don't have to know deep languages here. You don't have to know a lot to understand this, whatever you do, because that covers everything. Everything. Paul is saying, whatever you do, and that's this blanket that says, you know what? Nothing falls outside of the coverage of whatever you do. It includes everything. It includes your work day. It includes your Sundays. It includes your recreation days. It includes your time away from work, your time at home. It includes your waking and your sleeping. It includes the times you're eating and the times you're resting. It includes your recreational time, your vacation time. He says, whatever you do, if you're going to give an intense effort, you're going to add, you're going to go copious amount, you're going to supply a copious amount of effort to it, to this faith that he's given you. He says, you need to do it all the time. Nothing falls outside of this. See, and here's what's interesting. If you go and read beyond the verses that we just read in Colossians chapter 3, what you find is Paul has been talking in the context of everyday life. He just got done telling husbands and wives how to be better and children how to be better, and then he gets into servants and masters and talks a little bit about that. In fact, we come off the heels of all that right into what he said in verses 23 and 24. And what Paul is saying here is we're to dive into these tasks with diligence, to make intense effort, and it's our day-to-day life. It's a lifestyle. It's not, hey, I'm here on Sunday and I'm going to be a good Christian on Sunday for a couple hours as the church sees me, as the preacher sees me. No, it's an intense effort all the time. It's a lifestyle. It's what Peter would tell us. It's what Paul is telling us. The word whatever covers anything and everything we do. So intense effort is, first of all, lifestyle. Number 2, intense effort is strenuous. Paul says, work at it with all your heart. Work at it with all your heart. Now, I haven't been to the gym in a while because of my back, but I'm telling you this. Anytime I've ever gone to work out, I go with some intense effort to work out. I don't go and, you know what, I'll be honest with you, I've seen people, in fact, it drives me crazy. I go to the gym sometimes, and this is judgmental, and I know I go to Planet Fitness, and it's the no judgment zone, but you ever notice sometimes, like, people go in there, and you're thinking, hey, do you even work out? Because you've stood here and talked for, like, There was one guy, as I worked out for an hour and a half one day, him and his buddy talked the whole entire hour and a half. In fact, I came in, they stood there and talked, and I worked out for an hour and a half, and then they left. And then I left, and they were still talking. And I'm thinking, I wonder if they ever worked out. See, what we have to realize, there are some people that go to the gym just to be seen at the gym, and then there's some people that go to work out. And that's what Paul and Peter would echo those same things. In this pattern, Paul says, hey, you know what? Work at it with all your heart, because intense effort, this diligence, is to be strenuous. With all your heart, it means from the innermost fabric of our being. He's not talking about the pumping of blood in you. He's talking about your core self. And he says, hey, you know what? Give that intense effort. It's something not only do you do for everything, but you do it with some strenuous effort. That intensity is strenuous. In the New Testament, throughout the New Testament, we see examples of the heart. And once again, the word heart, they're not referring to the blood pumping. They're referring to the core of who you are. In Matthew, Jesus talks about people who are going to wax cold as the end times go near, and they're not going to love God anymore. And he says that the love of many will wax cold. And he talks about their heart being a cold heart. In the book of Revelation, John writes down the words that Jesus gives them. And John records the words to this church of Laodicea. And he says, during this time period, the church of Laodicea, they aren't cold and they're not hot, but they're lukewarm. They have a lukewarm heart. But then we find the third heart in the New Testament I've seen is the disciples that were on the road to Emmaus after the resurrection of Jesus in Luke chapter 24. And they spent some time, and Jesus, not knowing he's Jesus, he's walking along with them. He starts telling them all about who the Messiah is, and he shows them how the Messiah was going to come and die and suffer and resurrect and all that, and they got excited. And then their eyes are open, and they see Jesus, and he goes and he leaves them. And the first words that these disciples talk to each other, you know what they say? Did not our hearts burn? Burning heart. So you have the cold heart, the lukewarm heart, and then that burning heart. And those are the three hearts I see in the New Testament, which leads me to that question of strenuous, which heart do you have? Which heart? If intense effort should be strenuous, which New Testament heart do you have? Are you cold-hearted to the things of God? I have to go to church on Sunday. Cold as the weather outside it is right now. I have to. I don't want to. Well, what's the bare minimum I have to go to church? Sunday morning for an hour? I'm not going to Sunday school. That's more than extra. I'm not going to Sunday night. That's more than extra. And Lord, don't ask me to do any extra service things. Are you cold-hearted? Maybe you're lukewarm. I don't care what they do. I got better things to do for me. Not really hot. I'm not really cold against them. I'm just not with them. Or does your heart burn and say, man, I wish we'd get on fire for God. I can't wait. I can't wait to the next thing. Man, I'm there. I miss God. I miss the studies of God and who he is. What kind of heart do you do? So intense effort is a lifestyle. Intense effort is strenuous. Number 3, we'd say intense effort is sacrificial. Paul says there in this passage in Colossians 3, he says, as working for the Lord. He didn't say as working for yourself. See, the problems in our effort issue is the fact that American capitalism has messed us up. And I'm not against capitalism for that matter, but what I want you to understand is capitalism is built on greed. That's a sinful principle, right? It's built on greed. It really is. And the problem is we start getting and living in this way, and so we expect everything is for us. And Paul here, he says, you know what? Whatever you do, that's the lifestyle of the intense effort. He says, you're going to have to work at it, and it's going to be strenuous. And now the idea of this intense effort is going to be sacrificial because it's not going to be for you. It's going to be working for the Lord is what he says. See, we're supposed to live as to the Lord, not to men. In fact, over in the book of Romans, Paul says it a different way. In Romans chapter 14, in verses 7 and 8, the Apostle Paul, he says, and he's given us some understanding of wrapping up some theological use. Now he's given us practical application to it. And in Romans chapter 14, verses 7 and 8, he says this. He says, for none of us, that includes you, me, none of us lives for ourselves alone, And none of us dies for ourselves alone. Verse 8, he says, if we live for ourselves. No, he already said we don't do that. He says we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. That's why when you get to the book of Philippians, Paul says, hey, for me to live is Christ, and to die, that's his gain, because I am living a sacrificial life. And that's what Peter would say, hey, this intense effort we have has to be sacrificial. It's not about you. It's not about your comfort. You know how many times I've heard people complain about, well, I don't like the way the preacher does things because I want my music and I want my seats and I want my... How selfish have we gotten in Christianity? In 2022, if we're going to add intense effort, let's stop being about us and let's live intense effort the way Paul says to do it. Let's live for the Lord, and that means sacrificial. Remember, Jesus Christ, he said it this way. When people were asking to be followers of him, he said, hey, if you want to be my follower, you know what you need to do? Deny yourself. Deny yourself. Whatever you want, stop going after it. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And he didn't say to do it once. He said do it daily. That's strenuous. It really is. That's sacrificial. That's a lifestyle. And number 4, he ends it this way. He says you will receive the reward, which is intense effort is rewarding. I didn't want to end on a negative note. It is. It's rewarding. Hey, I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard, strenuous. It's a lifestyle. It's sacrificial. But in the end, it's rewarding. Remember I told you, I always told my students and I told my ball players, effort's everything. And when you apply that effort, here's what I find out. When you apply that effort, you'll win. You might not win everything, but you're going to be a winner. And that's true because that's the pattern that Paul would tell you. Paul said, hey, you know what? I may not have everything I need, but I have everything, I may not have everything I want, but I have everything I need. I'm content. And I finished my race, and I fought it, and I've got prizes available to me, waiting for me in heaven. That's what he said as he looked into the eyes of the executioner who's going to chop his head off. Paul, how are you going to do this thing? Hey, it's rewarding is what he tell you. You'll receive a reward is what he says here. Whatever you do it not for yourself, do it to the Lord, do it all the time, and you will receive the reward. See, the same God that has given you everything you need for a life of godliness, a life of divine nature, a life of the calling that he's done, he's also going to reward you in the end for living the life that is effective. And that's the great truth. In fact, go back to our text in Peter, 2 Peter chapter 1. He ends it by saying this in verse number 10. He says, therefore, verse number 11, I'm sorry, and you will receive. He didn't say you may receive. He says you will receive a rich welcome, not just an average welcome, a rich welcome into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We'll get to that verse down the road, but I want you to see as we look forward into this effective life, that's what he promises. Peter says, hey, you know what? It's rewarding. It is sacrificial. It is a lifestyle. It's sacrificial. It's something that's tough, strenuous, but it's rewarding. So as we wrap it up today, what does that mean for you and me? Intense effort. Effort is everything. And Peter's not talking about earning salvation. Once again, he's telling you, hey, it's time for us as Christ followers. It's time for us as a church in 2022. Stop making promises that you're going to read your Bible more. Those are great, but that's not what God called you to do. He says, live an effective life. That's what Peter says. And you do that through intense effort by adding in copious amounts, going all out, not doing the bare minimums, not showing up 5 minutes late after they started singing and sit down in church and act like you did a big service to God because you came. I'm talking about, hey, let's get involved this year. Let's start living the life and let's start adding these qualities we're going to start talking about next week. Jesus, as we wrap it up, here it is. Jesus one day was approached by some people who were trying to trap him using the law, using their religious laws. And this lawyer asked Jesus, he said, hey, Jesus, out of all the commands, and there was over 600 commands plus some new ones that they were making up every day. He said, out of all the commands that God has given us and religious laws have made, what's the most important? He thought he had them. He thought, man, this is so hard of a question. And Jesus looked at him. Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, 38, Jesus said, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. You know what Jesus was saying that day? Jesus saying the effective life, it's a lifestyle. You got to do it all the time. It's not just something you show up once in a while to church and do. It's a lifestyle. It's an everyday thing. He's saying, hey, you know what? It's going to be hard work. It's strenuous. It's going to be sacrificial because it's not about you. It's about God. But it's going to be rewarding. Because here's what we also know about Jesus. If you study through Jesus' teaching, you know what he taught? The best way to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, is to love other people. Wow. That's how we do it. So this week, I know you're tired of making resolutions, you're making plans, you're making goals, but this week, what can you do differently? Not just easily, but how can you make an effort to be more like Christ this week? Not just a little bit, but a lot. That copious amount, that overwhelmingly supply of intense effort. We put a lot of effort into planning our vacations, our fun, our recreation, our hobbies. Man, I don't know how many times I hear people go, yeah, preacher, I'm not going to be at church this week because of this. That's cool. You know what? You're not hurting me because this is not my meeting, it's God's meeting. What are you going to do when you have to stand before God and say, you know what, God, I know you asked me to make intense effort to be a better Christ follower, but I was a better employee. But I was a better, or at least I was trying to be a better whatever hobby I had. I was trying to be better at whatever, but I never tried to be better at being a Christian. How about this year we start and do things different? I'm not asking you to take on a new program, but I am asking you to take a new approach. Peter says, make every effort. Diligence. Let's add some intense effort. I want to encourage you as we finish out today, if you don't know Jesus Christ, your Savior, you listen to all this, you're off the hook. You really were off the hook. None of this applied to you because you're not a Christ follower. Because what Peter said, he said to Christians. So if you're not a Christ follower, you're off the hook. But let me just say this. We want you to be a Christ follower. Because there's coming a day, if you don't know Jesus Christ, there's coming a day when you'll have to stand and answer to that. The Bible says if you reject Jesus now, then he'll reject you then. And when he rejects you, he'll send you, not because he doesn't love you, but because he's a just judge. He has to judge your sin. He will send you to a place that's not prepared for you. It's prepared for Satan and his angels. A place called hell, the lake of fire. See, he didn't prepare that for you, but people are following Satan more than they're following God. So your choice is today to follow God or not. If you don't know Jesus Christ, your Savior, we'd like to help you on that journey. We'd like to show you how you can know Jesus, or at least talk to you about it. You can reach us here at the church through email, you can go to our website, you can go to Facebook. We have different places. You can call us here, stop by. Most of the time I'm here. We'd love to have a conversation with you about that. Pray for you, show you, answer some questions, because I know you have questions. Most of this message today is for most of us, though, because most of us here listening are Christ followers. And the truth of the matter is it wasn't easy because, you know what? We're selfish people. We have our own wants. We have our own desires. Man, I want the church to look like this for me, and I want my comfort, and I want this. Hey, how about 2022, we make it less about you and what you want, and more about God and what he wants. See, I don't want the church to be what the pastor wants. I don't want the church to be what the deacons want. I don't want the church to be what even the congregation, and I know this sounds crazy, but I don't want the church to be what the congregation wants. You know what I want the church to be? What God wants, what Jesus wants. And it starts with you, it starts with me. Humble yourself before God today. Maybe you need to bow your heart and your mind right where you're at as you're listening and say, you know, God, I'm tired of making all these commitments to read my Bible and to pray and to show up to church, and then I just sort of fall off the wagon. I don't do it anymore. Maybe this year, instead of making promises to programs, I put some effort into following God. It can be done because Peter did it. Peter, that same guy who was a failure and denied Jesus 3 times, stands up and leads that church in Jerusalem as no one else did. And we saw thousands of people come to know Jesus because of his boldness. Couldn't you be that person? You could. You may give me excuses. You may give God excuses. But you know what the truth is? You're responsible to do with what God has given you. So let's make 2022 the year that you become the effective Christian and walk an effective life.